嚟，你盡心盡力照顧我哋。每次續約後放假返完早家，都繼續用心工作，做足本分。我都盡我嘅本分，準時出糧，俾足人工。保重啊
You too!
Employers and foreign domestic helpers should build a good and long-lasting relationship. This can only be achieved when both sides respect each other and take their obligations seriously.
A sensuous interpretation of love and lust, Richard Strauss's opera, Salome, performed by world-class opera singers with the Opera Hong Kong. Salome will be staged at the Hong Kong Cultural Centre on the 9th to the 12th of October. Tickets are now available at all Tix outlets.
The latest scenic images from around the world. Prince Julian Watch presents Earth Live, every night at these times on Pearl. Prince Julian Watch presents Earth Live, after the news roundup.
A mass rally is underway outside the central government offices in Admiralty. A warning that Beijing may intervene in the Occupy protests. And more overnight clashes between Occupy demonstrators and opponents in Mongkok. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. Pro-democracy protesters remain defiant tonight in the face of attacks by opponents and warnings by the government to clear the streets. They've been staging another massive rally tonight in Admiralty. Well, to give you a live shot now of Admiralty, tens of thousands showed up earlier for the rally after the chief executive appeared on TV today to once again urge everyone to go home and allow things to return to normal by Monday, and so that the 3,000 or so government workers can get back to work Monday morning. Tonight, however, students we spoke with said they viewed the appeal more like an ultimatum. Standoffs around the city have been growing uglier throughout the day as the two sides traded insults and at times taunted police. Meanwhile, in Mongkok earlier today, several people were hurt and fighting broke out between Occupy Central protesters and those who opposed the movement. Anti-Occupy protesters also tore down structures set up by civil disobedience supporters. And this hour at Tamar, after those speeches, you can see some of the protesters have begun filing out, although with that many people there, it's probably take some time before most of them can leave. Meanwhile, an assistant professor from the University of Hong Kong has sent out an email to more than 100 academics warning potential Beijing intervention in the Occupy protests. Diane Till reports.
In the desperate-sounding email, Law said Occupy leaders have little say over the crowds now, and the situation is on the verge of spiralling out of control. He said this is equivalent to inviting Beijing to intervene, adding that commentaries in the state-run People's Daily have already been preparing for Beijing's intervention. Law said it doesn't necessarily call for the intervention by the People's Liberation Army, but as the SAR government loses its initiative, what little chance left for the matter to be resolved through negotiation is disappearing. Law said he hopes the recipients of the email can consider it from the view of the students' safety and stop actions from further heating up until they pass the point of no return. He ended the email saying no one can predict what incident will turn the situation for the worse, only pleading with the recipients to urge the students to be well prepared to retreat at any time and stay away from the most risky CGO West Wing gate and entrance. Political commentator Johnny Lau said the state media reports and commentaries on the situation in Hong Kong are possibly designed to create public support for action to come. He said the way these articles firmly stand by the SAR administration governing Hong Kong in accordance to the law builds a supportive atmosphere for the government's future actions. Politics professor and Civic Party co-founder Quan Xin-chi is warning against the use of the term revolution. This as many protesters have taken up the name Umbrella Revolution for their movement, as dubbed by the foreign media. Quan warned that it is sending the wrong message to Beijing, as state media commented today that pursuing a colour revolution in Hong Kong, like those in Eastern Europe, is a daydream.
The most important precondition for a way out is for all sides who have a stake in this movement to remain calm, to stick to the principle of non-violence, such that a cooling period can be established, and thereafter genuine, sincere dialogue can ensue.
Echoing the view, LegCo President Zhang Yuxing called for calm. He said he cannot see any way out of this current crisis, apart from the key figures in the Occupy movement and the government making rational decisions to really work a way out together. Diane To, TVB News.
Well, violence between pro-democracy and anti-Occupy protesters continued last night in Mong Kok, leaving many people injured. Owen Fung brings us more on allegations the police were lenient on the instigators.
Shantung Street. In the early hours of the morning, the man being held by others was said to have assaulted people who were supporting the Occupy protesters. A group of masked men rushed forward and began assaulting others. Anti-triad police officers later stopped a group of people on the junction of Shantung and Fa Yun Streets, and the two sides had a tense standoff. Police brought out batons to control the situation and arrested several people. Police found bags of bricks and a number of metal sticks nearby and took them away as part of the investigations. Scuffles broke out on Argyle Street, near Langham Place as well. Anger boiled over as people accused the police of failing to enforce the law in the face of clear violence. And on Sai Yi Street, there was a confrontation between police and a group of people outside the Golden Era Plaza shortly after 2 a.m. Officers retreated to around Macpherson Stadium and issued warnings to the group. Throughout the night, many protesters were left injured from the clashes. This man said he was attacked by a group of masked men. This protester said the police did nothing as he was attacked by anti-Occupy protesters. There were allegations that the police were cooperating with triads to attack pro-democracy protesters.
Some people say that the police or the government work together with the triads. Do you believe that?
I think so. I really think so.
Why do you say that?
Because we can see that when the bad guy come and then just fight other peoples, the police doesn't do anything.
The police, however, strongly denied such allegations.
There are some allegations that the police have allowed triad members to cause the disturbances at the scene in Mong Kok. I would like to emphasize that these are totally unfounded and are extremely unfair to police officers who faithfully and diligently perform their duty at the scene.
Police say they arrested 19 people in Mong Kok last night for offences such as fighting in public places, unlawful assembly and assault. Owen Fung, TVB News.
As clashes continued today between those taking part in the civil disobedience movement and those opposing it, some journalists were caught in the crossfire. Here again is Owen Fung.
On Nathan Road, there were confrontations between protesters from the two sides over roadblocks. The roadblocks were eventually removed. This university student says he came out to Mongkok as he feels a responsibility to protect those who are younger than him. Some anti-Occupy protesters brought knives to remove tents set up by the occupiers. This man says he brought a knife with him because he likes to eat fruit. Violence, however, was not only confined to protesters with different opinions. A reporter for local broadcaster RTHK was physically assaulted by a man against the Occupy movement. The attacker was eventually restrained and brought away by police. The Hong Kong Journalists Association says there are 5 confirmed cases of attacks on journalists. In a statement released today, the association condemns acts of violence against journalists by some protesters and police officers. The Foreign Correspondents Club Hong Kong says it's deeply disturbed by reports of journalists being attacked, especially in cases which are ascribed directly to police. The FCC was also unhappy with apparent police indifference to attacks on journalists. It says such reports do considerable damage to Hong Kong's image both at home and abroad. Secretary for Security Lai Tong Kwok also condemned the violence.
We do not approve any of this violence. Hong Kong is a lawful society. Every citizen in Hong Kong should obey the law. Nobody wishes to see what has happened yesterday.
Lai rejected allegations police were in collusion with triads and stressed they will enforce the law with patience. Owen Fung, TVB News.
Well, other news to tell you about tonight. The Islamic State militant group claims to have beheaded British aid worker Alan Henning. It would be the 4th such killing carried out by the extremist group that's been seizing territory along the border of Iraq and Syria. Helen Booknia reports.
The video released was similar to other beheadings by Islamic State, also known as ISIL, with a masked militant with a British accent standing over Henning. Henning, a 47-year-old taxi driver from Salford in northern England, was part of a convoy delivering aid to a Syrian hospital when he was abducted last December. Islamic State also released a video of an American aid worker, identified as 26-year-old Peter Kasich, being threatened with beheading. The killing drew international condemnation, the United Nations calling it cowardly.
This crime is a tragic reminder of the increasing dangers volunteer humanitarian personnel face every day in Syria. It also, once again, demonstrates the brutality of ISIL, which is responsible for thousands of abuses against the Syrian and Iraqi people.
This is, again, yet another just a very clear example of the brutality of this group and why the president has articulated and is moving out in a comprehensive way to degrade and destroy ISIL.
The U.S.-led coalition conducting bombing raids on Islamic State targets in Iraq and Syria could be joined by Canadian fighter jets soon. Canada's Prime Minister Stephen Harper said his country's Air Force will take part in the airstrikes. The plan will almost certainly be approved by the Canadian Parliament Monday. The airstrikes, however, have not slowed down a relentless push by Islamic State militants on the strategic town of Kobani in Syria. The group has encircled the town with tanks and bombarded its outskirts. Kurdish fighters defending the town say they fear a massacre is imminent. Islamic State has earned a reputation of extreme brutality in territory it has seized. Alan Bookniat, TVB News.
The family that hosted the first Ebola patient diagnosed on U.S. soil has been moved out of their quarantine department as public health officials continue to urge calm. Hazardous material crews descend on a Texas apartment after the family who lives there was relocated to a private residence.